obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry Podcast. We are so glad that you are here today with us. Today, we have Clyde Wilson and Leigh Thomas, and I'm Krista Olien. We plan to reflect on our conversation with Paul Gnasso from PCI. We had a great chat with him. I hope you enjoyed his interview and his podcast episode. He is a wealth of knowledge, so we love having somebody with that much wisdom in the industry join us to share our knowledge with our listeners. One of the first things I wanted to kind of pose a question was, Leigh, is there anything that you learned from Paul during that conversation in his expertise?
I so appreciated the whole interview. There was so much energy and positivity. It was really, really fun. But the thing that stuck out the most to me from that interview was Paul's discussion about how PCI so wisely navigated the pandemic. I was amazed at how they diversified to meet the needs of themselves, of their employees, even of their neighbors. They worked hard to retain their employees, even if the employee needed a different job description. They just really valued customer service and their staff. They didn't just, dump everybody and worry about the bottom line so much. They took really good care of their people. So I appreciated that. And then it kind of tied back to our earlier conversations about collaboration. Sometimes in our industry, we get kind of stuck in our own niche, in our own cubicle, in our own lane. But PCI, I think, is an example to all of us that collaborating with someone maybe you weren't expecting to collaborate with produces really desirable results.
Absolutely. I was not a part of the conversation, but I got to be a listener, which was a really great experience, being on that side of hearing y'all's conversation. And my biggest takeaway was something Clyde mentioned at the very beginning. And I think it's that PCI really practiced patience and wisdom through their whole tenure. So they are a company that is prevalent across the country, but they are mainly located on the West Coast, which is where they started. They have expanded nationwide, but for 50 years, Paul talked about Gil getting his 50-year pin. And for 50 years, they have served the industry and served it well and practiced a lot of patience as all of these new ideas are coming from different directions. I know we talk about Moore's Law a lot, but they kind of let Moore's Law have its way and then take advantage of what is left at the end of those kind of revelations. So I love the takeaway that I got, that you don't always have to be the first to do something. You can be the last to do something and do it the best and still win by practicing that patience and implementing something that is already sound and using that to your advantage. So yeah, Clyde, what was your biggest takeaway from the episode?
Well, I think you just mentioned part of it. When you're a company that really values the service that you provide to your customers, you look at buzzwords and technology differently, because your first goal is to be sure you're delivering a good service to your customers. You don't want to go out there and experiment with something that everybody doesn't really know whether this is working or not. So they take the right approach, that our first obligation is to our customers. We have to open the doors every day, get everybody in, and make sure it's clean. That's our priority. If we want to start looking at technology, we can do it, but we're going to watch it first. And they've done a great job of that. When you look at the parking industry as a whole, they have really done a good job of maintaining the first thing. We say it in our list of things that we do. All of the things that we do are designed to do accountability and service, customer service. So they take accountability seriously because they're an old-time parking company, and they take customer service very seriously. So that transitioning that other people are out there going through all the time, PCI may or may not select that system and may transition into it, but only after they know that it's going to keep their service level up. I think that's one of the most interesting things that we heard in their conversation the other day.
Yeah, it was a great example of putting first things first, right? Taking care of the accountability and the customer service.
Right. Instead of running out there using buzzwords and trying to do new things all the time that nobody knows for sure what works. I think the other great thing about having this, and we certainly want to do the follow-up podcast now with Gil Barnett, the owner. You're going to love talking to this guy. Right. They're an example of a company that has been owned by the same person for 50 years. There are just not many of these parking companies around. I don't even know that there are any left that have that level of ownership for that long a time. So when you're talking to people like Gil, he came up in that time of the parking business when it was truly the parking business, when almost everything was a lease, the money was yours, the expenses were yours, and you had to know the business to get through every day or just to survive. And he came up through that. So the people that came up through that kind of a background really understand the business slightly differently than I think the people that are coming into it today, because it's such a changed business. So it's great to hear them. And Paul came up through that kind of background. He started with a company I was there before starting the Parking Network. I was with a company called Epcoa Parking, and it was Airport Parking Company of America, and it was traditionally a lease company. It was transitioning into management accounts, but it had traditionally been a lease company. And Paul started there, and I cannot think of the guy's name on the West Coast that was our regional vice president. I can see him like it was yesterday, but I can't remember his name. But he was a really, really good guy. Really, really good guy. So Paul's been very fortunate that he's had good mentors all the way through. And now he's with the best with Gil. So
it's funny you're describing Gil, and I can put Clyde Wilson in that same spot, like somebody that has been around, been through it all, the tried and true methods, kind of seen the change from the beginning. And I think some people can look at that and think, well, they will always have one foot stuck in the past and look at that as a derogatory thing. I think that's a good thing. Having, like, knowing where you came from, knowing where we're going, and being able to have the vision to look forward and not only look backwards. And I think that's something that you and Gil probably have in common. That's the only way Gil and PCI can still be around in the way that they are now, is because they have to have that vision to look forward while also reflecting on how they got to where they are in the present. So as you're describing that, the idea of having a mentor, it's like, I can think of someone that fits that bill to a T. So I appreciate you in that, Clyde, and you being our mentor and helping spread the knowledge that you have to our listeners. Also, I think that's a great avenue to be able to do that. So I think it would be great to have two mentors on, two great people in the industry that have been around for a while. If Gil would like to join us, that would be fun. One of the other questions that I had was, when we think about a company that is primarily involved in customer service. So he talked about, they had to worry about whether the elevators were clean. Like, that has nothing to do with parking, right? But it's still a piece of the customer service they need to take part in, the elevators from the parking facility to the building they are servicing. What other ways do other parking companies outside of PCI, what other things can they be looking for to help in that realm of customer service? It's a topic we talk about a lot, but it's important.
As we're going through this changing time, we're about to face, or we're already facing, one of the most difficult challenges there is. And that's, as you move away from the customer, which we're doing because we have all of this new technology that is separating us from the cash, where the customer's right there. Monthly parking, more manual delivery of the monthly parking system, where the customer's right there. We're moving further and further and further away from the customer. And I hear this talked about in the parking industry, but in other industries that are going through the same thing. So one of the biggest challenges that we have as we move into this and become this transitional industry is moving further and further away from the customer, and how do you stay with the customer? How do you stay close to them? And it's something that I don't think anybody has it figured out yet. I think there's a lot we have to do. Going back to, I'll use this example forever, which was my example last year of buying parking online, and then the price changed when I got to the location. The price didn't change when I got to the location. The price changed on my cell phone on the bill I had that I didn't notice, and then trying to talk to somebody to discuss this. Now, I didn't really care, but I'm in the parking business and we're in the audit and review business. So I got to become a problem, a real problem, not a fake one, a real one. And the process was terrible. There are two companies that were involved in this were terrible, because I got handed down to somebody that was so far removed from this operation. I was just another customer complaining, and they really didn't want to hear it. Well, guys, we can't allow that. I guarantee you PCI is not going to allow that to happen. And we as an industry have to really look at this as we distance ourselves, as we allow not that we do it on purpose, but that as we allow technology to move us away from the customer, and guess what? Away from the island, the location. We all know now, we've been through all this. We know how important that island is, and it's pushing us away from it. Go ahead.
As you were saying that, two words came to mind. Customer service used to look like proximity. So the attendant in the facility was close to the person that was parking, utilizing the facility.
Right.
Now, I think as we move to more of the digital sales and the e-commerce and the buying online and paying online, the proximity is being removed, but the accessibility piece of customer service needs to be upped. We need to up the ante on our accessibility. So the way that people can contact the operator that runs the facility, the way that people can contact the third party that they purchase through, that needs to improve as well. And the accessibility, I hear horror stories all the time. This is kind of unrelated but related. So if you have an issue on social media, with your account, most of the time you cannot reach a customer service person. You basically have to delete your account and start over, is really kind of the resolve to a lot of things there, because they have no accessibility because they don't have to. And I don't want to see the parking industry turn into that. We already have your money, so we don't really have to be accessible because we already have your money. And I don't want to see that happen to our industry. So maintaining customer service on an accessibility level is, I think, going to be the most important factor moving forward. And what customer service will really start to mean to the people parking is that the person responsible for helping me accessible. Maybe I can't see them, but can I access them? And that also plays into, Clyde, you've talked a lot about in the past focus point and flow through, and how the command center, you wanted people out of the garage, right? So that proximity was being removed because it helped the facility run more efficiently, financially and operationally. But the accessibility wasn't being removed. They could call and be on a video call with someone right then and there. And the accessibility was upped while the proximity was maybe lowered. So the balance shifted, but the customer service was probably improved, honestly, because the people in the command center were so well trained.
We worked really hard at being able to pull that off, because I felt like when we started that everybody was that was going to be a critical point, that people were going to come after us on moving away from the site. We worked very hard at that. And I can tell you, everybody that was our client at the time, I could get them on this call and they would say, no, customer service went up. Everyone. Because we worked at making sure that happened. Instead of talking to somebody in a parking lane about your problem, if you were a customer, You were on the phone with the college-educated accounting person who had everything right there in front of them, or a command center person that could see you in the lane and knew exactly what was going on and could maybe, and many times, fix the problem before you ever hit the button because they could see your car coming into the lane. They could see something was wrong. So, but we had to really work hard at that. And I was very conscious of pulling that off. And it was interesting what you just said, going back to that problem that I was telling you about. I had two companies that I interacted with in that problem. First company that I interacted with, first of all, didn't respond to my emails, and then responded after the fourth request, finally, with, "Oh, I'm sorry, we've been very busy." Well, my first thought was, yeah, you've been very busy because you get so many people pissed at you. They're calling you all the time. And then it was, "Sorry, the price that you were charged is the price you're charged. Bye." And that's what I got. I went back and said, "That's not good enough." And they never responded to me again. So I called the other company that was involved in this, or not called them, intentionally didn't. I emailed them, and they never responded. I emailed them 4 times. "I've had a problem. This other company you're working with blew me off. Here's my problem." I stated it in the email. Nobody ever called me back. So if that's the direction the parking industry is headed, we're in trouble. I like that. That's why a PCI version of moving forward is much better for all of us, because they're anticipating that. And it was that was, I've told that story a lot because that experience upset me so much that not that it happened to me, that it happened to, none of those people knew I was from the parking business. I was just a customer, and it was interesting to see how that happened.
Well, and I think you even knew, you took it a step further because of your experience in the industry. You knew that there was more than one party involved. So
Yes.
I don't think the average parker
would
know to follow up with the second group that you reached out to.
Right.
So it still didn't go anywhere, right? But even like they should receive proper customer service with the very first point of contact is kind of the point
Right.
I want to drive home, is that we all have to be in it together. We are a service industry, and we have to perform that way and act that way, quite frankly.
Right. And it's interesting you just said it. We're a service industry. And if you blow off your service, what are you?
And you actually have to value it. You have to value customer service like internally in order for those exterior things to come about. You can't just fake customer service. Like, you actually have to believe that it's valuable.
I think as the customer, you can tell the difference between the company that takes it seriously and the one that's faking it. I think you can tell the difference.
In a lot of the roles we play, we are in touch with parks manufacturers, and one of the best ways to contact them is with their support email address. And I have observed that almost every parks manufacturer that we try to contact through support, the communication is almost instant. So I have really valued that if I need help from a parks vendor, just being in the industry, that doesn't really affect the customer that much, but being in the industry, being able to contact the parks vendor to find resolution for a question we have or trouble we're observing, I will say as a whole, they have done a pretty good job at being quick to communicate and clear and concise. And if the person I'm talking to immediately cannot help, they transfer it to the next person. So I think there's a lot to learn just from the way the parks vendors are handling the clients internally.
I also had a great customer service experience this week, or maybe last week. I was working with one of our East Coast locations, and we were having some trouble understanding what the equipment was telling us about about cart alarms, honestly. And we were getting different results from different reports. And so I just emailed, the equipment customer service people. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to get from my inquiry, but the same day I got a response back, and I could tell from the response that the equipment person actually considered my question and thought about it and sent me a really detailed response and answered all of my questions. It was so refreshing to have the information that I was seeking. So customer service, even over things that don't, I'm sure that guy at the equipment guy, like, my email was not a big deal, but it was a big deal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And he took the time to
Right.
respond and answer. And it was really helpful and great.
It's good, and it's good to have those those kind of good experiences, because you get to compare them with what you see in other places. The
Mm-hmm.
parking industry is so much of a service business that, we don't have a product. We have us.
Mm-hmm.
The equipment manufacturers, they have a product, and several fairly complicated products over time. That's beginning to change too, but they have a product, so they are very conscious of, is my product working? We don't have a product. And I think, I don't want to go on and on about this, because there are a lot of companies out there that do a good job, but we've certainly it's a big part of our business, and we've seen a lot of fails in this.
Mm-hmm.
A
Well,
lot
I
of
think
fails.
in the story you were telling about the two companies that you had reached out to about your parking reservation, I think the first company, it is their product. And so they technically are acting
Right.
as a parks vendor, technically.
Right.
And
Right. The first
so
one,
they
you're right.
should approach that with the
It's a
same
great way to look
level
at it.
of customer service, because they are the ones with the product that you used.
Right. That failed. It was their product that failed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you're right. I didn't really think about it that way. It is their product that I
Mm-hmm.
went online and used, and ended up being way overcharged for, not what I bought it at. And so that was what I was calling about. Your product
Mm-hmm.
changed the price that I purchased this at when I got an invoice, and they didn't want to hear it. Said price is the price.
Mm-hmm. So that's
Maybe it was
just
to
from
them.
just
Wasn't to
being
me.
just being in the industry. That's disappointing that our customers are being treated that way, because I'm sure that wasn't a one-off, like it. I hope it's not the norm, but I also don't believe it was just a one-time thing that no one else has ever experienced. So I know that we have room to improve there as an industry, and so I really want to see us head that way. And I think following the lead of companies like PCI that take the time to really focus on customer service and be patient with new technologies and changes and implement them in a thoughtful, wise way. I think all of those things are pieces we can learn from PCI and take into the future. So I think we've had a great talk here. And does anybody else have any conversation about our talk with Paul Gnasso and PCI and customer service?
Yeah,
We really got off
just,
on a customer service talk.
we did. I want to back up and say one thing before we exit
Sure.
here. Gil, who is much older than I am, but
I'm going to
Gil,
tell him you said
and
that.
only really a little bit. Gil and I came up through the parking industry when the customer was, the camera can't show me, but when the customer was right there.
Mm-hmm.
We came up and built an industry when everything we did, the customer was right there. And
Mm-hmm.
Paul came up much younger and as the beginning of the change, but he came up in a company that still had the customer right there. And so what I'm getting around to is, and I'm not sure I know the answer to this question, but just my observation would be, as we transition away from those people like myself and Gil, we have to hand this service issue down to the people that are coming up behind us, because they're going to have, and we already have people in the parking industry now in management positions that have never had a cashier in an aisle.
Mm-hmm.
So the customer is getting further and further away from them. So we do have to. I don't think we intended for this subject to go this podcast to go totally this customer service direction, but because of PCI's focus on customer service, it turned this podcast into a customer service conversation. But really, I think a very valuable one, because I hadn't thought about it the way we just talked about it as much, that our industry, because of what's happening, not that I've been out there creating stuff for a long time, so I'm certainly in favor of the new products that are coming along and the technology improvement in the way it does things, but we can't miss this service issue as it pushes us further and further away from the customer. We have to figure out how to stay close to be able to maintain that service level.
The focus has to be the same. The focus has to be on serving our customers. I think the approach will need to be different. And so what does that new approach look like? We have to consider what the approach used to be whenever the cashier was in the garage, right?
But then like think about coming up for me.
Yeah, got a whole nother episode. So what does that approach look like going forward? And the word I keep coming back to is accessibility. I think that's so valuable and something that it can take less personnel to be accessible. They just have to be of a highly trained skill level and a quality, a source of knowledge for those people that are reaching out to them.
Yes.
So
and they need to take Gil's advice. Paul not quoted him, but paraphrased Gil's advice about we have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
2 ears and 1 mouth.
So to be accessible, we really have to practice listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved that too. That you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so use the one you have the most of, or the highest commodity that you have, or however he phrased it. I did love that. Great advice outside of parking. I need to use that in my everyday life. I need to listen more.
Yeah, my husband would appreciate that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this has been a great episode, and we appreciate the thoughtful conversation that we've had and the organic conversation that we had. I love these episodes where it's very organic and we just go off on the thing that makes the most sense and reaches our heartstrings. So thank you for being here, and we would love any feedback that you have, and we would love to hear from you. So thank you for joining us on the Our Parking Industry podcast, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye. To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on Our Parking Industry podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.